Kale Thyros pressed his prosthetic hand flat against the munitions crate and held it there, the matte black fingers splayed wide, joint mechanisms clicking once before going still. Grain husks shifted under his boots. Through the shell hole in the granary wall, Jessad's remaining farmland stretched in a patchwork of green and dead yellow, the irrigation canals catching the last copper light of dusk. He had not moved in 20 minutes. The data core in his prosthetic palm was warm. It was always warm now. The display flickered to life without his asking. Famine records, dates, tonnage diverted, population decline curves. The same files he had stolen 6 years ago, the ones that cost him his hand and his name. He knew them the way a surgeon knows the scar he leaves. But tonight, the encryption key he had carried since the silent choir cut him loose, a key he had never fully deployed, unlocked a second layer. The second layer was not one famine, it was 12. 12 client worlds, 12 engineered collapses, staggered across a decade, each one timed to the fiscal quarter when labour contracts were renegotiated. The display scrolled, and Kale did not blink. Grain shipments rerouted, water tables poisoned, seed stocks replaced with sterile variants designed to fail in the third planting cycle. His father had not committed an atrocity. His father had built a machine. Serethi sat against the opposite wall, knees drawn up, her pale grey eyes watching the light from Kale's palm paint the ceiling. The binding scars at the base of her skull pulsed faintly, a slow, luminous rhythm she had stopped trying to hide. She said nothing for a long time. Then she spoke. Serethi said, "You've been staring at that hand for 20 minutes. Are you reading it or memorizing the way it looks when you don't do anything about it?" Kale's jaw tightened. He closed his prosthetic fingers over the display. The granary went dark except for the emergency lamp's amber glow and the faint pulse of Serethi's scars. He whispered, "It's not one world, it's 12. Serethi said, "Then it's not a confession, it's a broadcast." Kale mapped the exits. Door, half blocked by rubble. Blown wall, line of sight from the eastern ridge. Crawl space behind the grain bins, too narrow for his shoulders. 3 ways out, and he catalogued each one the way the choir had trained him, automatic as breathing. Serethi watched him do it. Serethi said, "You're counting exits again." Kale replied, "Habit." Serethi said, "Find a transmitter instead." Somewhere above Jessad's atmosphere, in the crimson-walled command chamber of a House Thyros dreadnought, Lord Thyros sat before a holographic display that painted Jessad's surface in infrared. His optical implant burned amber. The tactical overlay showed troop positions, resistance cells, supply corridors, and one pulsing marker deep in the agricultural sector, tagged with a designation the old lord had personally retired 6 years ago. He opened his desk drawer. The blade was still there. He closed the drawer. Lord Thyros said, "Bring me my son's hand. I don't care what's attached to it." The sound reached them before the woman did. Boots on broken concrete, a deliberate rhythm, 2-3, 2-3, announcing herself the way someone does when approaching armed strangers in the dark. Halia Vaughan stepped through the granary's blown wall with her rifle slung and her hands visible. She looked at Kale. She looked at his prosthetic hand. Her eyes stayed on the exposed joint mechanisms for 3 full seconds. Halia said, "That's choir hardware, Mark 7 field prosthetic, intelligence variant. I've seen 2 of those in my life. The men wearing them killed 9 of my people." Kyle said, "I'm not choir anymore." Halia replied, "The hand disagrees." She unwound the progenitor thread cable from her wrist and held it up. "I need to know who you are, and then I need to know what's in that hand. Because my people have been dying for 6 years on the back of a broadcast that came from someone with exactly your skill set. And I have a right to know if the man who lit this fire is sitting in my granary." Kale told her. He told her his real name, his house, the broadcast, the blade, the hand they took. He told her because she had lost an ear and a finger to the same family, and she was still standing, and because he needed her transmitter more than he needed his cover. Halia listened. Then she said, "Show me the data." Cale opened his prosthetic hand and let the display bloom across the granary walls. 12 worlds, 12 famines, dates, populations, mortality curves projected in pale blue light across the scorched concrete. Halia stood in the middle of the display, and Jessed's numbers passed across her face, her world, her dead, her 6 years of war reduced to a line item in a quarterly report. Halia whispered, "We were a line item." Serethi stood. She walked to the blown wall and looked out across the canal network. The progenitor glyphs in the stone channels were pulsing, faint, rhythmic, the same tempo as her binding scars. She pressed her scarred forearm against the nearest canal stone. The glow intensified. The irrigation cabling on Halia's wrist pulsed in answer. Serethi said, "There's something under the farmland. The canals aren't just irrigation. They're wired into something deeper." Halia looked at her wrist. The progenitor thread was glowing for the first time in 20 years of wearing it. Halia said, "What are you?" Serethi replied, "I don't know yet." Cale stood. Grain husks cracked under his boots. He looked at Halia's comm array, then at his prosthetic hand, then at nothing at all for 5 seconds. When his eyes moved again, they were not scanning for exits. They were measuring broadcast range. Cale said, "I need your transmitter, the full spectrum array, not the local channel. I need to reach every client world in my father's network." Halia said, "If you broadcast, they'll triangulate this position inside 90 seconds. Cale replied, "I know." Halia said, "Then you'd better say something worth dying for." Cale sat before the transmitter. The data was loaded. The broadcast frequency was open. His prosthetic hand rested on the transmit key, the matte black fingers steady, the joint mechanisms silent. Cale said, "My name is Cale Thyros. I am the third son of Lord Thyros. 6 years ago, I broadcast evidence of one engineered famine on one client world. My father took my hand for it. He keeps the blade in his desk. Tonight, I am broadcasting evidence of 12 engineered famines across 12 worlds, systematic, scheduled, industrialized starvation designed to break labor populations and suppress revolt. The data is unencrypted. Every house, every station, every Death World relay that receives this signal can verify it independently. My father built a machine that eats worlds. Here are the blueprints." He pressed transmit. The signal left Jessad at the speed of light. In the granary, the emergency lamp flickered. Serethi's binding scars flared once, bright enough to cast shadows, and then dimmed to their slow pulse. Through the blown wall, the progenitor glyphs in the canal network were glowing steadily now, a lattice of pale light spreading across the darkening farmland like something waking up. Cale pulled his hand from the transmitter. His prosthetic fingers were trembling, not from malfunction, but from the signal still resonating through the data core. 60 terabytes of evidence rippling outward through relay after relay. He was no longer a man with a secret. He was a signal that could not be unbroadcast. Halia checked her chrono. She said, 87 seconds. We move now. Serethi looked back at the canals one more time. The glyphs were still glowing. Whatever was buried under Jessed's farmland had heard the same frequency as the broadcast, or perhaps it had heard her. She did not know which possibility frightened her more. They left the granary through the crawl space Cale had said was too narrow. It was. He went through anyway, the grain husks falling from his coat as he crawled, leaving a trail of what Jessed used to grow before his family taught it how to starve.